Welcome to the Imperial Truth. I'm your host, Eric, and I like big robots, and I cannot lie. Today, we are going to be talking about automata, just generally the automata rules and how to implement them, and specifically how to help you with them in our Mechanicum lists for Horus Heresy in the third edition. So, a little bit of a background history of our automata. Prior to M26, the technologists of the day, Mars, it wouldn't have been considered the Mechanicum at the time, um, implemented what would later be known as abominable intelligence or silica animus, basically artificial life, thinking machines. And these thinking machines took the form of what would later be called the Iron Men or the Men of Iron. And these creations were self-replicating. So thinking machines that could self-replicate, and gradually through time they became resentful of humanity and decided that they were going to try to wipe humanity out. This led to an apocalyptic war that was really one of those points in sort of the history of our Warhammer world that we don't get a lot of images of, but when we do, they're pretty crazy. Giant machines that eat suns or bite planets in half. We just really have no grasp of what was built during this time, but it was so catastrophic that it led to the age of strife. And basically, humanity collapsed and technology receded, and we lost a lot of ground in the things that we were able to do. If you wonder why the Mechanicum and the priests of Mars are constantly looking for ancient technology, no matter how sort of insignificant or small, this is why. Because the technology that existed before the Age of Strife was godlike, was god tier technology, planet reshaping technology, being able to wipe out entire stars. Like it's pretty crazy stuff. And afterwards, we just don't have that anymore. This all led to what would be called the Crimson Accord of Mars. And the Crimson Accord of Mars is basically just this idea. Any sort of thinking machine that moves forward has to have a biological component. So from here on out, anytime we have a cybernetic construct or a cogitator or anything in that machine is a human brain of some type. In some cases, they are essentially fetal brains, really tiny brains to do things like work in auspex or something like that. And in some other cases, we could have multiple brains sort of wired up in order to provide us with the processing power, with the idea that so long as these brains are human in nature, they will not be flawed with sort of the problems of artificial intelligence or abominable intelligence, or the silica animus, right? They're not entirely removed from humanity. Therefore, they will not rebel against humanity, which, take it or leave it, that is the way that we stand now. So all of our cybernetic constructs, all of our automata inside of those organisms, those creations, are one or more human brains that are basically running the machine, that are piloting the machine. In the case of some of our constructs, and when we pop one up, I'll show it to you. Um, we can sometimes see skull motifs on things with little eyes on them. Those are not decorative. If you have like a Mahler cannon and there's a little skull on there, that skull is the brain that is essentially piloting it. It's a servo skull that's wired into that machine that does the targeting for that machine, which is pretty cool. Mechanicum is really fun with its weirdness. So on our automata unit type, we're going to go through all the rules and talk about them and talk about what they mean. So on our automata unit type, which is page 175 in the normal rules, we get three basic rules that are put in here. And these have been errated. So we're going to talk about that in a second. So don't go crazy yet. So the first one is that they cannot ever gain tactical statuses. They automatically pass the checks for a tactical status, and they can't actually ever get a tactical status. So they can't be routed, they can't be shaken, they can't be pinned, they can't be suppressed ever under any circumstances. They if they're hit by something that poisons, the poisoned X rule only works on a 6, which is not a huge deal. I've never encountered a poisoned weapon ever. But if I do, it's only on a 6, which is kind of good, I guess. They also cannot make reactions ever. So that kind of stinks. We do like to do reactions in this game, and the fact that we can't ever do reactions kind of stinks, but we're going to get around it. So if you're not familiar with Mechanicum, or if you're new to the faction, or if you haven't played many Automata, Mechanicum basically is all about working around these rules. So it takes these rules and it's like, well, what if we didn't actually follow them? And that's essentially what our faction does. So the tactical status as an automata has been errated. It's previously, well, it doesn't matter what was previously, but it was previously a little bit different from this. And currently it's the errata document has tacked on this section, which is basically if a unit of automata is joined by a non-automata model. So for us, that's going to be our tech priests, our magos, archmagos, things like that. They do make tactical statuses checks and specifically can only use the non-automata model characteristics for the check. And this is important because the automata usually have a willpower of 12, but not a willpower, a cool of 12. And our archmagos and magos and stuff very rarely will get up to a 12. I don't know that they can. Heavy gets them to 10. You could almost get there. So you could do it with heavy, you could do it with the Archimandrite, you could get to 11, I think. But it doesn't matter. We can't normally get to that number. And so we have to use the model that we attach to the unit. So you can get statuses on this. Now we'll come back to this in just a second because there's a little bit of a loophole with this. So the new post errata reads like this. So if you tack on this thing, it's going to read like this. You can't ever gain tactical statuses, and you automatically pass gaining a tactical status. However, if you have a model that can gain a status that's not automaton, then you have to take your check, and you have to use the characteristic of the model that is not the automata to do the check, and it's not automatically passed. Now, very importantly for this, this does not say that automata can gain tactical statuses. And the tactical statuses all say that if you include one or more models with that thing, you have a tactical status. So the way that I read this, and if you disagree, please let me know in the comments, but the way that this reads is, if I have, say, a unit of Castellax and a Magos attached to that Castellax, and I get hit with a pinning weapon, and I take my pinning check, and I fail my pinning check, the Magos is pinned. The Castellax cannot be pinned ever. Now, because they have one or more models in the unit that are pinned, the whole unit is considered to be under the pin status. However, if maybe pinning isn't a good one because you can't move when you're pinned, let's say suppressed. Let's say my Magos, who is suppressed, moves out of that unit. Well, those automata would no longer be suppressed, right? Because they can't ever be suppressed. That's the way I read this. It's a little bit gamey, but it is the way it works according to the rules. It does say explicitly that models with the automata type cannot gain tactical statuses. That is a line. That is there. They cannot gain it. So they can't ever have the status. It's only the model, the Magos, the Archmagos, or the Tech Priest that will get the status. So just be aware of that. They still are under the influence of the status while they're part of the unit. But because we can just move a model out of a unit, then you could do it, with the exception of pinned. Pinned was a bad example because I don't think you can move when you're pinned. All right, so that's interesting. Keep that in mind. That may be important later. Normally, you can't join automata units. So page 180 of the rules says that a unit can only have one type, and automata are a type. However, we do have masters of machine as a rule, which allows us to join automata units. And other factions have a variant of this or may have this rule that allows them to join as well. But we can have our tech priests, Magos, Archmagos, and I think the Architor can also join automata units. They also have master of machines. Page 230 of the rules, we cannot embark automata onto transports or disembark from them because of the fact that they are not infantry or paragon, I think are the two types that can do this. However, the rule for compact, which some of our automata have, allows them to embark and disembark. So again, a lot of this is you can't do this, you can't do this, except when you can. So just be aware that we can have situations where we can embark on transports, at least with the Silex and the Echidnex, I think, are the two units that do this. Automata never give outside support. So on page 259 of the rules, when you're doing a challenge, you get +1 to your focus roll for every 5 models, I think. I don't know. I don't get outside support for my army for every 5 models. However, automata never ever count towards this. So you never are getting that thing. So you're always going to lose that aspect of it. It kind of sucks. I think it's kind of garbage, honestly. They do count towards combat resolution, though. So at the end, when we're counting to see who's outnumbered, you still count automata. I only mention this because I did it wrong in a game recently because I just assumed that it was the same for outside support and combat res, but it's not. So if you have let's say you have these selects here and you have a unit of 10 and your opponent has 8 Space Marines in their combat, you are outnumbering them because you have more models than they do. Interestingly, for the outside support, walkers, so dreadnoughts do count, but Thanatars don't, question mark, even though they're bigger and tougher and more wounds than a dreadnought, they somehow don't count at all towards outside support at all. GW, I know that you watch these. Please fix that. That seems dumb that's the way that works, but we don't ever get outside support. For combat resolution, this is really interesting. So for combat resolutions, this is page 272 and 273. Automata can lose combat resolution, but they can never be routed, which means that they can disengage if they lose combat. So when you have combat resolution, there's a bunch of different things that you can do. You can fall back, you can hold, you can pursue, you can gun them down. There's a bunch of different things that you can do. If you draw, you can't disengage, which means that you can only fall back. Am I saying this right? No, that's backwards. I'm so sorry. You can only, if you draw combat, you can only disengage. Falling back is if you get routed. Now, if you lose combat, you can fall back and voluntarily be routed. But again, automata cannot. And the difference is the distance. So disengage gets you your movement, and falling back gets you your initiative plus D6, which for us, usually you're going to want the movement one. But yeah, we can still fall back. We can still disengage. We can still move out of combat. But then we can be pursued, which is not necessarily always great. Normally, you're going to want to hold. But we can pursue as well, and that's interesting. So we have the option to kind of do things, but we can't ever be routed unless, of course, you have a Magos or an Archmagos or Tech Priest in the unit. Then you can definitely be routed in your combat. All right, so with that said, the last of the rules that we kind of get into with this are objective markers. So objective markers on page 308 of the core rules, we cannot ever control or contest or whatever an objective marker with automata. And it's specifically stated that any unit that has any automata can't do that. So you can't argue that like the tech priest in the unit can contest because the unit contains at least one automata, and so you can't do it. And it's not, I've checked, it's not in majority of, like it is with Vanguard or Comptroller or stuff like that. So we can't control objectives. We don't give outside support. We can't take tactical statuses unless we put a guy in the unit, and we can definitely take tactical statuses. We can't embark on transports. Yeah, at this point, automata seem pretty bad, right? Like it's a bunch of negatives, but it's really not, because tactical statuses are a huge part of the game, and Mechanicum basically can get around most of these things in ways that other factions can't. Oh, and there's one more. I'm so sorry. Forgot about Vanguard. So Vanguard, on page 339, because Automata can't hold objectives, they aren't going to give up Vanguard points, at least for ranged Vanguard, because ranged Vanguard says that you have to be holding the objective or contesting the objective in order to get the Vanguard points. So when your unit of Castellex that are on their own and there's nobody in the unit, they get shot off an objective. Well, now they can't hold the objective anymore, so it doesn't count, which is kind of funny. Yeah. So this is really interesting, and I put this up here. We're going to talk about Vanguard because it's something that we got to dig into a little bit. So this is it's been errated. So this is the 339 and the errata. So the 339 page is the core rule. Basically, the first point was if an attack made for a unit that includes a majority of models with the Vanguard X special rule causes the last model in an enemy unit that is controlling or contesting an objective to be removed as a casualty, you get the Vanguard points. The second paragraph, the second point, got errated. And now it says, if a unit that includes a majority of Vanguard model or models with the Vanguard X special rule has at least one attack made for it in a combat that results in one or more enemy units that had at least one model within 3 inches of an objective, not controlling, not contesting. The reason why this has to be the case is because when you're in combat, you're not controlling or contesting an objective. So yeah, it was broken the way it was on day one. At the start of the assault phase, either falling back or from combat or being massacred, right? So one, we don't have to ever fall back because we can't be routed. So that's fun. We can lose combat and not fall back. So you can always choose to not fall back if you're just automata, if you're only automata, which is pretty cool. Being massacred is going to give them Vanguard points all the time, right? If you lose your guys. No, that's not true, actually, because there's another FAQ that flew under everybody's radar, and I haven't seen anybody talk about this, and I am so excited about this one. If an enemy unit which cannot control or contest objective markers, for example, due to heedless or the cavalry subtype or the automata type, is forced to fall back at the start of the assault phase within, or after starting the assault phase within 3 inches of an objective, as described in the second bullet point, is that a condition for scoring Vanguard X rules? No. Your automata never give up Vanguard points, not if they're on their own, because they never control objectives. That is really powerful. This is really powerful. Not only can they get shot off objectives and not give up points, now they can get forced off objectives without doing this, right? And I know this doesn't address massacre, but there's no reason why that massacre would suddenly be applicable if fallback doesn't apply. So yeah, this is pretty cool. I like this a lot. Suddenly we can't get tactical status, and we also are never ever going to get Vanguard points off of the objectives, which is pretty cool. All right. The next thing to talk about is sort of how we can manipulate some of this stuff. So Battlesmith X is on page 326, and Battlesmith X happens before or after moving. So it's in the movement phase. So if you're locked in combat and you have a tech priest or a magos who's locked in combat and they want to use Battlesmith, they can't when they're locked in combat because you don't get to move. However, you can target a model that's locked in combat. So I can have a magos who's not in combat, Battlesmith somebody who is in combat, it's just the model that's doing the battlesmithing that can't be in combat. So this removes X number of damage from a model or X tactical statuses. The tactical statuses aren't a big deal for automata because they can't get them. However, we can remove damage from a model that's in melee. Servo arm is going to increase the number of damage or tactical statuses that we can remove by one, which is pretty handy. But yeah, just remember that if you have a model, let's say, I don't know, a 10 wound Thanatar that is in melee with something, you can just stand a tech priest behind it and be like, I'm just going to repair 3 damage every single turn. Just repair it. Just keep fixing it every single turn, which, is a little annoying for a person that's trying to destroy that model and remove it from play. Yeah, just keep in mind that it doesn't specify that your target has to not be locked in combat. All right. And then we have all of our exceptional Mechanicum rules. So Master of Machines lets us join automata units. Cortex Controller lets our automata make reactions. So you're usually going to want that. Compact allows automata to embark and disembark. So things like our selects can get on transports. And then Cyberthurgy, we're not going to rehash Cyberthurgy, but basically it allows us to guide, fortify, or quicken anything that's automata. And in the case of the Silax, it's not Cybernetica. It's just the automata keyword. So we can do it to anything with that keyword. So yeah, there's a lot of sort of versatility in Mechanicum for automata. It's very cool. So now let's talk about a little bit of strategies with this. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm super out of sorts today. The last thing that we need to talk about, I keep doing this, is the Cybernetica high-tech arcana. So this is the Deus Machina. Deus Machina? I don't know how to pronounce that. But basically, this allows our Cybernetica Archmagos, Magos, or Tech Priests that are in a unit of automata to hold, contest, or control objectives. So suddenly, if you have a Tech Priest in the unit and they're a Cybernetica Tech Priest, you can now hold that objective, which is pretty cool. It allows us to kind of play with this. And in addition, we have a Paragon of Battle, Paragon of Metal prime advantage for this the Cybernetica detachment that allows us to have automata that are going to control objectives, just like regular tech priests, which is also pretty cool for this. So we have some room that if we want to hold objectives with our automata, we can, in theory, do that. All right, so let's talk about a couple strategies that I think are pretty cool for our automata and how to use them. So the first one is pretty simple. People jumped on this pretty much on day one, but we want to talk through this. So this is the idea of running them as a wall of iron. Castellax Battle Maniple, probably with Power Blades, because Power Blades are better than the shock chargers by a mile. We're going to put a few of them in a unit. 2 is probably sufficient for doing this to tactical squads, and it's a jerk thing to do to tactical squads. But we can do it with more. So I run a unit of 5 because I think that that's a nice wall for this. So we're going to give ourselves 5, a number of Castellax guys, and they are all T6. 4 wounds. They have a 3 up and then a 6 up save, but it's actually a 5 up save if you're getting shot at. And that is a good stat line for these guys, especially if we're just using them to kind of block objectives. So they are on really big bases. We can kind of position them so that a tactical Marine can't move in between them. And then we're going to position them around objectives to sort of bubble wrap objectives, or we're just going to charge them into your stuff. I do have maybe a typo here. You guys can debate it in the comments. They can't gain tactical statuses. They can never be routed, which means you can just lock up a unit of infantry pretty much forever. They don't ever give up Vanguard unless they're destroyed in melee, ? That's that wiggle room that we talked about earlier. It's not explicit in the FAQ, so I put it in here because I always default to whatever is worst for me in a game. But you're really not going to convince me unless there's some explicit rule that says it, that if I can fall back off an objective and not give up Vanguard. but if I get destroyed, I give up Vanguard? Question mark. I don't know. Anyway, discuss it in the comments because engagement and the machine god. But if we put these guys into a unit of tactical Marines, right? This is the nightmare scenario for those tactical Marines. They are never going to destroy these guys. They're just never going to move them off of an objective ever. In addition, if because these guys hit so wimpily, they're noodle arms, they're probably not going to usually kill a tactical Marine. In fact, you could intentionally give them the shock chargers to make them less likely to kill tactical Marines. And if you did that, they can't ever fall back. They can disengage as a result of the combat, but they can't fall back. And so if they disengage, they're going to move 7 inches away from you. Now, that could get them far enough away that they can't do anything. But remember that with disengage, they have to end 2 inches away from any of your models, or they're still locked in combat. So they disengage, let's say the closest model gets about 7 inches away from you. You can then use your, I don't know what it's called, but it's basically your follow-up move. And that follow-up move is your D6 plus your initiative, which is 3. So statistically, on average dice, you catch them, right? Or not half, so on average dice, half the time you're going to catch them, which is fine. But even if you don't, they're going to be 7 inches further away from the objective, which is pretty cool. These guys also have implacable advance and firestorm, so they get to shoot, and then they get to shoot again during the assault phase, and they don't necessarily have to charge for that. And you can battlesmith them. So again, you can move them up and put them in front of an objective so that your opponent can't get to them. And then you could put another unit behind scoring the objective with battlesmith, say a unit of tech thralls behind the objective, scoring the objective with your comptroller and your tech thralls, and then just be healing them every turn from the 1 or 2 wounds they might suffer from the tactical Marines. And you're just going to lock them up the whole game like this, and just be very annoying. Yes, your castellaks are going to be engaged, but ultimately you're going to be keeping them off of an objective, which is very cool. It's a very neat thing to be able to do. And again, the counters to this that you would normally have, which is, well, I'm just going to vanguard you off of this objective. You're not going to vanguard me off of this objective because you won't get vanguard points for these guys. It's even better than the expendable rule. Another way to do this with another unit is the Thanatar. So the Thanatar, especially if we have Paragon of Metal for that +1 to weapon skill and +1 to initiative, that's really, really powerful. And this is the Thanatar I like to do it with because I really want my other Thanatar to be sitting back and shooting things with that Solix heavy las. So this is the guy that I'll put it up there, the Thanatar Cabus, I think. So the Thanatar is weapon skill 4 with Paragon of Metal. It's initiative 4. It's strength toughness 8, which is really, really high. That's Leviathan level height. It has 10 wounds, which is really good. It's got a 2-up save with a 5-up invuln just all the time. It doesn't have the special rule that the Castellux has. It's just always a 5-up. It can't gain tactical statuses, even with Paragon of Metal. Now, you could get Vanguard points, because technically it can hold objectives at this point, but it can't ever get tactical statuses. So what we're going to do is we're just going to dump it into something big. Terminators really hate this guy. Why? Because a normal Terminator squad is hitting this on 4s, right? So they're hitting this on 4s. They, with the Power Fist, they're wounding it on 4s because they're strength 8. So they're hitting it on 4s, wounding it on 4s. That means you need 30 Terminator Power Fist attacks to kill this. 30 attacks to kill this. If you don't kill it, well, I'm just going to battlesmith it back up. I'm just going to heal it every single turn. And yes, your Terminators may eventually, over the course of a 4-turn game, kill my Thanatar. I don't care. It did its job. Mechanicum hates Terminators. We just don't have a good answer for getting rid of Terminators easily. This guy can lock up the Terminators. And yes, again, those Terminators could disengage after combat. That is a possibility. And then you just follow up against them, which is pretty fun. You're never going to kill a Terminator with this. The shock chargers just don't hit very hard, but it can do it. Even against a dreadnought, so against, say, a Leviathan dreadnought with the fists, or a Contemptor dreadnought with its fists, you still need 14 dreadnought fist attacks, which seems high, but keep in mind they're hitting on fours. They are wounding on twos, but you need multiple fists to get through. I think you need 4 fists to get through to kill it. So again, it's just going to sort of lock up a dreadnought. And, dreadnoughts are easier for us to deal with than Terminators, but it's still funny to do. And then you're just locked in combat. And again, I can just put a tech priest behind him and just heal 3 every turn. And it's going to take even longer for you to get through my Thanatar. Now, if you get hit with a lot of things, it's gonna definitely kill you. Like, these aren't invincible, but they are really, really durable. And it is worth noting that you can lock them up for a long time. With this. So these are good tar pits. Now, let's get to what I think is kind of a really fun strategy, and is definitely gamey. And this is the Tech Priest Sacrifice Gambit. Okay, this is the way this works. I'm going to put Cybernetica Tech Priest, probably with Cortex Controller, into the unit. Now my Cybernetica unit, they can hold and contest objectives, they can react, they can do all the things that I want my guys to be able to do. Okay. And one thing that I've been playing with in doing is actually doing this with a Magos that is an Archimandrite. So the Archimandrite Magos has a higher with Archimandrite and so sorry, what's it called? Archimandrite and combat veterans. I think they're at cool 10 or 11. It's really high, which is great. We want that. But then we can't score. So then you just take a Cybernetica Tech Brace with basically nothing on them and toss them in there. And now you can hold and contest objectives. Why is this a play? Why is this a thing? Here's why it's a thing. You shoot my unit that just has a Tech Priest in it, and you shoot it with like a suppressive 3 gun. I don't want to take a suppressive test, so I'm going to take those wounds on the Tech Priest. Now my Tech Priest dies in the shooting phase. Yes, I can't control and contest objectives anymore, but I also can't take status effects anymore. So that suppressive gun, it doesn't matter, right? So I can just lose him. Same thing with the Vanguard points. So if I'm worried that you're going to hit me with a big Vanguard unit and sweep my unit off the objective, I can intentionally kill my Tech Priest in volley fire or in in the shooting phase. I mean, heck, I can even give this guy a plasma pistol and intentionally overload it, hoping that I'll fail the test, right? Like we can kind of game this out a little bit. And once my Tech Priest dies, I can't give tactical statuses. I can't be routed. I can't give up Vanguard points, right? You can game out some of your units, probably more Castellax than anything else, so that you intentionally kill your Tech Priests in the combat. And then suddenly you're not controlling and contesting objectives, and you can't fall back off of objectives, and you're not giving up Vanguard points, right? Like, heck, you can even do a Tech Priest up with a Master Sergeant and just issue challenges all the time, and pull guys out of combat, pull that big, mean guy that was going to do a bunch of damage to your Castellax. He's now out of the combat because he's killing your Tech Priest. And yes, your Tech Priest dies, but now after the Tech Priest dies and you lose combat, it doesn't matter because you can't be routed because there's nobody in the unit that is other than Automata. Don't be afraid to throw your Tech Priests away. The more I think about this, the more I'm like, man, there's a lot of versatility here, and I may just have to run more Tech Priests so that I can dump them whenever I need them, and just know that they're going to die to protect the Automata. It's kind of a fun strategy. Let me know if you've thought about this on your own, or if you've played with this, or what you think about this. It is a little gamey. And I will admit to that. But we live in a world where people are reacting back into transports pretty regularly. And so I think that the idea of a tech priest throwing himself in front of the much more valuable automata to protect it isn't as crazy as your guys constantly jumping back into the Land Raiders. All right, so conclusions. I I think that the uncommon rules interactions that we get with automata is actually an advantage. It's a feature, not a bug, because it means that people might not anticipate sort of what you're going to do with your automata or how they're going to play into the game. I'm not saying use gotcha moments. Definitely talk to your opponent about things beforehand. Be like, hey, listen, just so you know, you're never going to get Vanguard points off of this unit because they don't interact. Like, don't be a jerk to people. That's not what I'm advocating. I'm just saying that like it's a way to build your list that's different than what most people are going to be used to. Mechanicum's specialization is that they work around the limitations. So they help you to get around the limitations without necessarily facing a bunch of consequences for negative parts of the automata. I think that if you really want to get good at automata, you need to learn how to not exploit the rules in a bad way, but to maximize the benefit of your automata with minimizing the negatives, right? So the negatives are that we can't usually do reactions. How can we get around that? Well, I always put a tech priest with my Thanatar. Calyx so that I can do reactions with that guy. I don't really care about that tech priest beyond just being a +1 a ballistic skill buff to the Thanatar, and then allowing it to make reactions against things that are shooting it. But if you shoot my Thanatar with a suppressive 3-gun or a stunning 3-gun, I will gladly give up that tech priest to prevent myself from being able to be suppressed. I'm totally fine with that. And I still get to make my reaction against you because the reaction is declared at the start of the shooting attack. So in the check for suppressive is made at the end of the shooting phase. So my tech priest is long dead by then. I'm happy to give up tech priest to prevent you from being able to score Vanguard on my unit that was contesting an objective on my turn, but because you shot that unit in your shooting phase, that tech priest is dead, and so now they're no longer contesting objectives, and I can't give up Vanguard points, right? Like I think that's the way that we need to be thinking about this, and I think that that's a completely reasonable way to play. Let me know what you think in the comments, though. If there are things that I missed that you've been doing with your automata that make them kind of fun and engaging, please let me know. I really appreciate the fact that we can have conversations like that. And if you think that I got any of this wrong, let me know as well. I do get things wrong sometimes. And let me know what you think about the Vanguard thing. It's very clear that if you fall back, automata don't give up Vanguard. If it's only automata, by the way. However, well, hang on, let me back up. If you fall back off an objective with automata and a cyberthurgist, you would give up Vanguard points. But if you don't have cybernetica guy, you would give up Vanguard points. But otherwise, if it's Archimandrite and you have the automata, you would not give up the points because you can't control the objective with them. Do you think that that applies for the massacre too? If you have just, let's say, 2 Castellax on an objective and you get massacred by a unit of Terminators, do you give the Vanguard points? I read that as that you don't, but I'd be curious to know what you think in the comments. All right, that's it for this video. I will see you guys in our next video. Thanks for watching.